Thank you very much. Yes, my name's Rob Evans, and I've worked for a number of years in the old Gwynedd archaeology area, working for Heneb, and one of the big projects that we've done recently is connected to St Cybi's Church at Caergybi, Holyhead, and like. Like any project, it involves quite a number of people. It's been done for the church in Wales as part of a reordering work that they're doing at St Cybi's. So I've got many people to thank, like the Darlith archaeologist Andrew Davidson, the construction firm Grosvenor, and my team and manager John Roberts, Anne Marie Oates, Mike Tunnicliffe, and Jesse Gardner and Stuart Murphy, without whom everything I say wouldn't have happened. And I wouldn't like everyone to think it's me. It's all part of a big team in what we've done at this site. Now, most of you will probably know that Holyhead is right in the northwest of Anglesey on Holy Island, and is the main port for the Republic of Ireland, as people probably know. And the thing is that it has a good deep water harbour, and one of the first things to say is that we know that it became an important place, almost certainly a fortified port for the Romans. And as we can see on this plan of within Holyhead, by the railway marshalling yards, outlined in red are the three sides of a late Roman fort, late 3rd or early 4th century, and open on the eastern side. And that will become apparent later. The outline buildings within the wall, below where it says PW on what you're looking at now, is where the main church is, and below the lower PW, outlined in the thick dark black line, is the eglwys, the early burial chapel that's supposed to be where St Cybi was buried after the Romans had abandoned it, and an early medieval, early Christian site was developed on the site. So looking here at the Ordnance Survey map of 1888, it gives a clearer idea of what we've got. We've got as you can see, three sides of Roman wall, most damaged and effective on the southern side, but the two towers we see on the eastern side, one above where it says St Cybi and Vicarage below, they are generally much later rebuilds, and there is some surviving evidence of an external tower on the northwest corner. And as you can see, there's a path running through the churchyard, and the two areas that were looked at initially is an area marked 2 and 1, one to the west of the eglwys, the burial chapel of early medieval period, and one where it says 2. Now that bit you can see is outlined and filled in on the map. That's because there was an 1817 vestry there. So when we look at the pictures in future, that area is open. So, but I will explain how that works as we go through. So we've got the Roman walls, the church, which is supposedly on that site at least from the 12th century onwards, but the main work that we get, the main evidence, is late 15th, early 16th century. And next to where it says 1, an earlier eglwys that is possibly 1400 in date, and there are bits of that missing. And as part of the works the church were doing, archaeological work was needed in these areas, and I will try and set the context a bit and then we'll see what were the results of what we did and what we achieved. So this is an aerial photograph of 1945 taken by the RAF at the end of the war, and you can see the Roman wall enclosure in the top center of the picture, with the eglwys Bydd looking like the low building to the to the west in the northwest corner of the fort, and large graveyard, which is the interior of the fort, and essentially what we're looking at is a around 1500 church. And you will see in front the marshalling yards and the railway lines leading towards the port. That is all reclaimed land, as our next slides will show us. And you can see it's very full here in 1945. It's not usually quite as full now, but the railway still runs in that area. But that area is all reclaimed land, mostly in the 19th century. And this next image shows Holyhead Church by Lewis Morris in 1740. And it's an interestingly disproportionate image because the church is beautifully done. It shows the earlier chancel, which is no longer as it is. It was rebuilt by the Stanley family, who are the main local family in the 19th century. But the rest shows it as it is. But it completely fills that half of the old Roman fort, and it's nothing like that. And if you'll remember from the earlier images, it's a bit more central than that. And where it says B is the eglwys Bydd, and that seems totally out of position. The little gateway towards the town is off centre in the wall, whereas in fact it should be much more to the left in this image. And where it says B is the eglwys Bydd. So that bit has been drawn in plan, whereas the church is shown in full. But the interesting point about this is it shows a chancel to the east, which is wider than the nave, the main bit of the eglwys Bydd itself. I think that's a pre-Reformation in the 1400s extension, but it's odd that it's wider than the nave bit of the eglwys Bydd. It's rare for eglwys Bydd to have two cells anyway, but this shows one point that will be made later on in the talk in terms of the archaeology that has been found. And so it's interesting in that way, but it's not positioned in the right place. The gateway into the town isn't in the right place, but it makes an important point that we haven't got in the other evidence that we've got. And here is John Roberts's drawing of 1790, and the interesting thing about that is you see the rocky edge to a cliff and the beach coming almost up to it. Now that area now is a graveyard extension, and then you've got the road, and then you've got the marshalling yards and railway before you actually get to the sea. So there's been a significant amount of encroachment on the sea from the 19th century onwards, which rather changes the perspective of what you actually look at now. But the walls of the Roman fort and the towers can be seen, and a wall edging the churchyard on the cliff top, which is not the original fort, which is not related to the original fort. That's to enclose the graveyard, so is probably 17th or 18th century in date. It's not fully appreciated in this way, but I think essentially the Holyhead Fort is a defended trading place or something like that, something where, or just a fort, but where the boats can come in and offload into the fort, and they're protected from the landward side. And they've chosen this spot because it's a good port facility area, and that's why I think that's what we've got. You can just see beyond the chancel of the church a little a hipped roof there that is a gable end roof that is the eglwys y Bydd with a bit of Roman wall behind. And here is the church from the from the north side, and you can see that the tower is built into the Roman wall on the western side, and that's the area too that was looked at as part of the examination of this area, which was done in a number of phases. And that area west of the door and in front of the tower was looked at. The tower is basically a 17th century rebuild, and it's been suggested it was done then for lookout purposes, which is crucial in the Holyhead area. And the bit of nave and transept that we see are around 1500, and the chancel to the far left of the image is much later. And here is the south side, the much more famous side of the church. You can see a very elaborate perpendicular porch of around 1500, and the south transept has very interesting carvings of that date within the crenellations above the sundial, and you can see the 1500-ish nave in between, and the chapel to the southeast in front of the chancel is the Stanley Chapel, where the family of the local big house Penrose, the chapel was built there in 1897, and that was an addition to the building. And as we can see within the churchyard, it is divided up somewhat by paths and railings, and you can just see peeking out on the left side of the image the edge of the eglwys y Bydd, which is a detached building. And here's the eglwys y Bydd, and this is right in the southwest corner of the Roman fort. We can see the Roman walls either side of the building, and the corner is behind the chapel. And the interesting thing of this to look at is you can see the chancel arch. So there was a chancel that was demolished by the 1800 time, but by a local worthy, Captain Skinner, and the area was improved, and the chancel arch was bricked up. So the eglwys y Bydd was returned more to its standard size, its standard previous size, which is presumably bigger than the original one, but very interesting remnants of the chancel arch there. And our excavation work was both behind to the west and in front to the east of this building, which is around 1400 in date. So the project work was quite a big scheme. There was quite a lot of work being done both within eglwys y Bydd and the church, and I just thought it would be interesting to show this slide of a cabin being set within the northwest corner of the of the churchyard, and it's been lifted in by a huge crane, because we've got the absolutely scheduled Roman wall of the Roman fort around it. Now that obviously had to be protected as a very important scheduled ancient monument, and so the cabin was lifted in over that. I thought this is quite a good image showing the kind of care and attention that has to be given when we have important archaeological remains around it. And you can see within the churchyard here that the graves have been laid flat. This happened in the 1950s. It's actually been agreed in the 1920s, but it was a heavily overgrown churchyard, and the gravestones were laid flat after reordering and leveling in order to make the graveyard easier to maintain. So that's what the area where the buildings aren't is like within the Roman fort. So the work that was done it's been a long-term project with a number of phases of work, and I thought I'd go through them sort of in turn and then bring it together a bit. So we will go to some areas and then away and then come back. We'll do it in further phases that was worked. So we've got parts 1 and part 2. So we start at the west end of eglwys Bydd. That is this area. Once again, we see the Roman fort walls, and behind this wall to the south, you can see that there's other buildings that have been built up against it. That's happened from the 18th century onwards. That's the town side, and you had the market, the far side of that area. So they were built and partly used as their back wall, the Roman fort. The strange opening with the wooden support in it between the two ranging rods is all been blocked up now, but was a window and an opening into the lower room of the base of the building that you can see above. And the west end of eglwys Bydd is to the left, and you can see the carved stonework that formed the top of the western entrance into the building that has been blocked up at least since the mid-18th century, when the building was used as a schoolroom. And you'll see also just to the west of that a revetment wall. That area was dug out in 1992, and a certain amount of archaeology was uncovered then to in order to stop dampness getting into the eglwys Bydd building, which it was to a very great extent. You can see 2 gravestones that have been laid flat in the foreground there. And this shows, I just thought I'd show this as well, because it shows the wall of the Roman fort and some evidence of sort of almost herringbone type masonry within it. The top courses of this have been much rebuilt and much redone and clearly remortared, but there's a substantial amount of Roman masonry surviving. And it's important to point out at this point, I think, that we know very little about the internal features of the fort, because there's been so much grave digging from the early medieval times right on to the mid-19th century, and we'll come on to that. But that is likely to have disturbed much as what was present in that area. Obviously, everyone's very keen that some evidence was uncovered, but that was our most difficult area, and we got the least information about that. So the excavation started in that area, and as you can see, we had a thick mixed topsoil level, and in fact we had about a metre of mixed deposits of 19th century date. And what's interesting in this area of the churchyard, the whole churchyard was closed in the mid-19th century, but there hadn't been burials in this area since some time before that. We're going to find them earlier, and the evidence for that is the sort of deep topsoils with some earlier material deposits within it, and the use of this area to put charnel, which had been dug when other graves were dug and material was reburied in this area. So our first archaeological section drawing within that trench that didn't go right to the edge of things, and you could see the line of a big pit in there, 1006, which you can see in the section here of this work. And you could see that the pit lies below the horizontal ranging rod. The old west entrance to eglwys Bydd is nicely shown in the church in the background, and there you've got a metre of very mixed deposit. Evidence of burials and other material of that was generally below that, except to the north, and I'll come on to that later. So the layers of various forms of deposits of soil above the burials noted. And so within that was a vast quantity of late 18th, 19th, and then in the top early 20th century dumped material that had got into within the soils. Now, they were not without interest. Generally things are, but here we have this pot that an investigation we know made between 1837 and 1845, and it's a political pot advocating for the repeal of the Corn Laws. It was made by Everard Colcow and Townsend in Staffordshire. And the thing about this is, Holyhead was a port where the cheaper grain could have come into from North America and other places, and the Corn Laws were a very active issue at that time, and it works, and it's an interesting story that people would be campaigning and have political paraphernalia that is associated with that. So an interesting find amongst the general household waste of 18th century dates. And there, this is not from our site, is what the pots actually looked like. You can see it says cheap corn in an upright standing bag below the rigging, and that's on the bits you saw in the previous slide. And then all that deposit removed, and we found, and you can see where it says 1019, that is some charnel. So that is a deliberate burial of a person who'd been buried, presumably somewhere else to the north of this area, where a new burial was being put in, and quite reasonably some bones that had been found had been reinterred as charnel in this fashion. And there we can see what that's like. You can see beyond the small 20-meter scale to the right, the edge of the charnel pit that it was in, and there was lots of material of this nature in mixed deposits below the Victorian level. So this must be earlier than that, late 1700s, early 1800s perhaps. And below that, we did find the evidence of actual burial. So up until into the 18th century, and we did find a Hibernia halfpenny of King George II of 1739, I believe, associated with the burial that you can see marked 1024, the central one, the one that was outlined in a coffin. So we know this area was being used for burials up to that sort of time. And that it doesn't show an awful lot, but it shows where the locations of the three graves. That area was looked at first, and that was done as an evaluation, and so to understand where the archaeological deposits were, so that protection could be done as best as possible. The other area we had to look at was northwest of the tower, which I showed you earlier. And that is this area here. You can see the Roman wall of the fort to the west, and the north door, very much of Tudor date on the other side. And centrally, there's a redone bit of wall, which you can see, which is actually of 1817 date, when a vestry was placed in that gap. And we were asked to look in this area, and you can see that we came down onto the 1817 vestry, and you can see there some stub dwarf type walls as foundations, some remnants of the plaster over the Roman wall, and a brick-lined tank in the corner. And looking the other way, you could see that there's a recess in the wall of the 1870s. We actually found evidence of the of an old radiator in there, so they've all been plumbed in properly, and you can see here how actually some of the Roman wall has been protected by the use of the plaster on top of it. And there we see that again. And this is an interesting point. To the left, that is the north aisle, the west wall of the north aisle of the church, and that was the doorway into the church cut through in 1817 for the old vestry. And people wondered what appears to be the other opening in the north side of the tower wall is. You can see there's a metal rod below that. People wondered what it was, but we were informed and we got the information that that is where the parish safe was when the vestry was in here. So that's of 1817 date rather than some earlier blocked opening that people were perhaps looking for. And here you see how far the vestry went. So it extended about 1 metre proud of the north aisle. And in the corner was a brick vault. It was a little brick opening area for a tank, and that's later 19th century in date. But the point is, you can see that has dug through all the deposits, and you can see we've got down onto, yes, it's been scraped, but onto the glacial clay. So the deposits and possible burials in this area, in this part of the churchyard, don't go deeper than that. And this shows how that was. Now, down in the northwest corner of this area being opened up are a number of stones set into the lower deposits, and these predate the 1500 church. So we don't really know what that represents, but they're definitely under the church wall. So are we looking at evidence that relates to the 1200 church and what happened afterwards? They're obviously later than the Roman times, but work didn't continue in this area because it was decided not to move forward at this stage with work in this area. So we didn't get to look lower down. A small amount of charnel was found, but very little evidence for the actual burials within the churchyard. And what we can see here is that when the vestry was demolished in 1980, the doorway from the vestry to the north aisle was blocked up, and it was done in quite a haphazard way, and there were lots of bits and pieces, but it was all right. Behind that is some good 1500 work which actually supports the whole aisle, so it's not structural in any way, that part of the work. So this shows we've got the tank, we've got the doorway, we've got the rubble, and we've got an 1817 wall there. So that work was a bit more limited, but and was decided not to proceed there. So we're now going to go on to the next phase of the project, which was inside the church. Now here, with a number of the senior management team here, we're within the chancel that was redone in the 19th century and significantly affected by the restoration work undertaken by Sir Giles Gilbert Scott between 1877 and 9. We're rebuilding, and the tiled floor and the pews date from that time. And we were having a bit of a look at what was going on in this area. And there is the hole that was dug. And you can see that it's actually a number of layers, but you will see down 107, a mixed soil with charnel. And that was an incredibly mixed up deposit. And what that shows, and we nowhere near got to the bottom of anything of that deposit. So that means we didn't have any archaeology that was prior to the to that 19th century work. And it shows just how extreme the works done by Sir Giles Gilbert Scott's team were in this area. But we did another area went back behind the last two pews at the west end of the church. Small intervention to start with, but it got a little bit bigger, and there you can see all the soil build up above, which is Giles Gilbert Scott's work, and it came down in here, and we stopped at this point. You can see that this burial of a young person, and insisted that this was not moved, and this was covered up again and redone. So there we have got the interface between the work that was done as part of the reordering and releveling by Giles Gilbert Scott from 1877 to 9, and earlier work. This is an in situ burial within the church, but all the work stopped at that point, and further investigations weren't done within the church. But our layers and depths, and that's a good metre and a bit down, were understood at this point in the areas where we looked. This gives us an idea of what we did. Where it says wooden plinth, that's the plinth on which the pews sat. And you can see how we got the grave in that tiled floor beyond, and the column pier where we got the little S's below wooden plinth. Those are foundation stones for the 1500 column pier. So we got some evidence for date for that. We got evidence for the 19th century for Giles Gilbert Scott's work, and a burial below that. That was the work, the excavation work that was done in the church, and no in situ burials were moved there. That remained as it is. So then we had to look east of eglwys y Bydd. So that is this area again, the red splodge to the east of the eglwys y Bydd building. There we can see the gates through the Roman wall, which is the area where we're going to be looking. Now, you'll remember from the Lewis Morris map that I showed you of 1740, it showed a single arch. And there is another line drawing of mid-18th century date that shows the view from the marketplace beyond those gates, and it's a single arch. So those two archways relate to the work that was done around 1800 when this area was reordered and the chancel of the eglwys y Bydd was removed. And I think the bit that is Roman is, you see where the Heras fencing is to the right, there's one jamb above that, and I think that level is where the arch sprung from, and you can see two of the limestone blocks above, near the top of the Heras fencing, and that the single arch sprang from that, and that the two arches we get are 1800s date. So the very top material that was very modern was moved by a little machine, and then we came down onto the fact that there were obviously services coming through in this area. Now, that area where you've got the line of stones and a raised area, there was gas coming through there, so that area had to be left aside and left as it is. That's why the stones are there. They're as a warning. And this is that same area later on, and you can see actually three phases. You could see worn stones to the right of the red and white ranging rod, actually within the church, within the trench. They're probably of Roman date, because they go under the wall, and they are worn, so they have had feet on them. And beyond that, you see a lighter, compact area, and that is part of the south wall of the chancel that was wider than the eglwys y Bydd nave bit that we've seen before. And you can see the gas main crossing in front of it. So I think in this we have got Roman and we have got medieval. And that shows a remnant of the east end, probable former chancel wall of eglwys y Bydd, and you can see a stone popping out to the left there near the section, and that's interesting because that does go under that area of wall, which has been dug into and damaged on the eastern side, as you can see. So it's a little bit confusing. And that sort of shows it again in a bit more context and showing the relationship of where the east end of Eglwys y Bydd is to Holyhead Church. And this shows what we achieved. The bit we've been looking at was where it says 111 to the left. The rest of the area didn't have many burials and showed the glacial natural coming through at a shallow depth. And we did have one grave at this level, and that's indicated on this drawing here. And then three to the north of the gas pipe, which you can see on the left of this drawing, graves 1, 2, and 5, and bits of charnel were dug into this area. We think, however, this is after the chancel has gone out of use. And the sections along and behind show the makeup layers, but also some evidence of the Roman wall below where the gate was. So we did that once again as an evaluation, part excavating that area, and then last year we had to go back to the west end of Eglwys y Bydd. So it's back to the end behind where number 1 is on the plan that you can see now, and back to this area again, and that's how it is after it had been reinstated from the first excavation, and had not been as cut recently either. But the retaining wall of 1992 was still there to the east of this area that we're looking at. And that was to come down this time, as was all of the soil in the area to the west of Eglwys y Bydd. And what that has given us is more evidence of the Roman wall. We were only digging down to an agreed construction depth and trying to preserve the archaeology as much as possible beyond that. But you can see that on this section of the east facing the western Roman wall, that we got more of the angled masonry, and obviously we still had deposits that were not down to any kind of Roman level, but the area had been used for burying charnel. So this is an extension of the area where we were looking at, where we had that charnel burial shown earlier, but also cleaned areas. This is the southern Roman wall we see here in front of that, and you can see that there are actually some recumbent grave markers in situ for deeper burials there. They in this area were not disturbed. And this is the section through the more modern material on the northern side. And this trench that was done initially before widening goes down, it's got us down onto a level where in situ burials are. And this is it from the other way, showing the distinct difference in the soil colour with what we had above. But on the northern side of this area behind Eglwys y Bydd, we had the burials, the churchyard that was open up until the 1850s. Burials continued to almost behind Eglwys y Bydd, but not actually behind Eglwys y Bydd, but at the level where Eglwys y Bydd started. So we got some of these earlier 19th century brick-lined graves. So obviously the slate slab that had been on top, probably with the inscription, had gone, and this had been buried by the soil deposits that we'd had in the 19th and 20th centuries. And you can see that there's some collapsed brickwork to the foreground from another grave that was a brick tomb like the one you see in the background, that had collapsed onto another burial that we'd got there below. And I'll come to why that's interesting and what the story is there. But interestingly, you have this stone-lined grave, you have this brick-lined tomb, and you have this gravestone behind it. Now, that gravestone was standing isolated from any grave it was associated with, because big graves had been cut down either side of it, showing the point that in graveyards with archaeological stratigraphy, some of the graves are quite late and cut through a lot of the earlier ones. So you lose quite a lot. You do lose quite a lot of evidence, but also you have interesting evidence available. It came down onto some the brick box came down onto some stone slabs there, and these are the burials within it. And that was obviously below the stone slabs. Now, below the stone slabs, we had an 1826 George IV penny. So we know that this predates that. And you can see that there's 3 burials in there, buried very much on top of each other. You wonder if they were very contemporaneous, and there isn't the evidence of separate coffined burials, so they may have been buried in shrouds in that grave in that way. And it's been dug, and you can see there that that's later, and you've still got that simple stone-lined one, and we've still got the collapsed bricks to the right there, which is to the south. At this level, surprisingly, there were still some in situ markers. Now, this has still got a bit more soil around it than it should have, but that's just to support it from falling over. Obviously, we've no idea with these simple markers of what date they were, but what's interesting is soil seems to have been dumped to build up the levels, even leaving 1 or 2 of these in situ. They wouldn't survive like that if there'd been full clearance and material hadn't just been dumped around it, I think. So here's the collapsed wall from a box tomb, and there's the person who, unfortunately, the bricks had collapsed on, and there was a nice slate slabs below, like that, clean. And I'll quickly move over this, but that was the grave below the slate. And the interesting thing is you still have the decorated coffin plate and various interesting features associated with the grave. So we had then looked at that whole area to the west behind Eglwys, actually up to the Roman walls, and we'd got down onto where, in places around 1800, but earlier 17th and 18th century burials were with charnel on top. But it managed to be arranged so that there wouldn't be too much disturbing of those burials from then, so work was able to carry on then without more disturbance. At the east end, where services had to go in, there was more work to do. So we go back to the east end of Eglwys, and that was later on last year. So back to the area east where it says Roman wall of the Eglwys. There we see the area reopened, the bit that's been done in the earlier work, the 2023 work. You can see Eglwys nicely with the chancel arch and the Roman wall to the south. And when you see this image, you can see how different the twin gates are, and how clearly they're relatively modern, well, 1800s work. And so you see the east end, the chancel arch of Eglwys and the work in the foreground. So this is the kind of thing, this is the gateway into the churchyard. Ahead of you, beyond this picture, is the church. And this, we have the Roman wall and the gateway to the south, and we're looking across it. So what you can't see so well is the east end of the chancel, which is in the foreground beyond that modern work, this side of where the T is, but you can see that there are some steps to the right of the ranging rods, and that was entrance through the gateway, and I think 17th and 18th century date. But what you have got in the bottom right of the image, below the two service pipes, you can actually see a stone and a right angled turn there, and that was a earlier building. There was a grave inside, and that related to the chancel arch. So that area came down, and just to the east of the northeast of the chancel arch, some burial material was removed, but we came down onto these graves. Now you can see that there is orange, a much orangier, brighter glacial clay there. So we have got through the later burials, and we are onto the earlier burials, and we have stone-lined kists that would have had graves, which, as I'm sure many of you know, is characteristic of the early medieval burials. And here shows it more clearly. And further on with the excavation, there's a patch of disturbance straight ahead, but to the right, to the west, you can see a nicely lined kiss grave. You can see some service pipes above, but that shows it's a nice quality. And it has been suggested that it was reported to Nghaer Rufeinig in the earlier sort of 1840-ish time that kiss graves had been discovered in this area. There was no evidence of any body within it. There needn't have been, because the decay could have been all there anyway, but it could have been empty in the 19th century because the material within that was disturbed, even though you've got the natural below it, and those stones appear to be remaining in situ. So this is the this interestingly shows that grave that we just looked at with the nice stone lines, and another much more poorly preserved stone-lined kist to the south. Now you can see that has been partly disturbed by the foundations of eglwys Bydd, which you can see in the top corner of the image, and so the south side of that has been disturbed anyway. But you may be able to see, if you look carefully, a bone within that does appear to be within situ. It's slightly to the south of the lighter coloured kissed edging stone. And there, that shows the fill, which is much more mixed, of the other grave, and some of the stones on the base. There were no surviving capping stones where we were looking at the graves. And there is the fragmentary remains of a bone. I don't know whether we'll be able to get much good information and dating from this, but it does appear to be an in situ bone from one of the earliest graves dug in the churchyard. Now we're very near the eglwys Bydd, and these graves should be quite early. I can't quite say how early, but they could be 6th, 7th, or 8th century. So it will be interesting to see if we can get any information, any date from this. And we have got samples from the fill of the grave as a whole. Now, this is very interesting, because I think even only in this small patch to the northeast of the eglwys Bydd building, we have found a bone and something relating to the earliest Christian use of the site in those centuries after the Romans. There's been suggestions, some's been seen in the 19th century, but we may have some dating evidence. And obviously quite a bit of this has been done at other places, but it's exciting in such an important place in the history of early Wales, the early church, and at the time Wales as we understand it was being formed, that we have got some very valuable information, I think, from the excavations in this area. Between eglwys Bydd, which is to the left, and the southern Roman wall to the right, there were some paved stones and some suggestions of kist burials. Now that seems quite high compared to where we had them in the rest of the site, but the point is this is a narrow passage. There's been much less later activity, but this was left undisturbed. Also, as part of the works, services had to go in. This looks pretty bad, it looks pretty destructive, but it isn't. This is all very shallow. We're only down to a depth of about 400 millimeters, 40 centimeters, something like that. So they can put their pipe in. All the soil there was very heavily disturbed. We ensured the gravestones were looked after, and that won't have any significant effect on the archaeology that we've got. And also looking at it, there's been some recording and cleaning and conservation work on the wall itself. There was growth within it that needed dealing with. We weren't doing that ourselves, but it was going on as part of the project in relation to what we're doing. So it was quite a widespread bits of work to hopefully keep this site going and keep the interest in St Cybi's Holyhead. And so here is a view afterwards. The building is starting. You can see where the Roman walls are, and you can see where the foundation is, and everything else below that we could is protected and has been recorded and worked. So we're looking here from the church tower south towards eglwys Bydd that we see on the left, and the Roman wall around it. And at the other end, you can see eglwys Bydd, and just behind that single red barrier down there, that's where things had to go, and we had to go deeper. And so we were able to see that small patch of the early evidence within the churchyard that hopefully will be of great significance. Post-excavation work on the material recovered has not yet been carried out, and so the actual dating of these sequences will need to come out later in the report, and carbon-14 data is going to be crucial for that. We've got a lot of later deposits and build up of later material, but hopefully we will get some dates on some of the earlier stuff. We've got what we know from artifactual evidence from the 19th, 18th, perhaps back into the 17th century, but we still have work to do to work out exactly our earlier sequence and just how early those kist graves with that bone is. Thank you very much.
That was incredible. Thank you so much, Rob. I'm going to invite anybody to pop any questions that they have in the chat, but I'm also going to now allow mic and camera for attendees. So if you'd like to pop your hand up and ask anything in person, you're welcome to do so. There we go. I will stop the recording now so that people can feel free to talk amongst themselves.